How's it going, you guys? So in this video, I just want to talk a little bit about the new Atkins for a New You by Eric Westman, Stephen Phinny, and Jeff Volek. The reason why I want to talk about this book is because I'm a huge fan of Stephen Phinny, Jeff Volek, and to a lesser degree Eric Westman, all leading experts on low carb nutrition in their respective fields. This is probably the best book on the practical how-to on low carb diets that has the majority of the information right and doesn't have any kind of like stupid nonsense in it like a lot of books do. And generally, for my, in my personal training business, when I have a client who wants to know all the little details and I'm not always available, I generally recommend them to pick up this book as a little hand guide, a hand booklet, to answer their questions if I'm not available, because it basically highlights everything you need to know about the basics of low carb nutrition, and it is backed with the science to prove it, written by the very people who basically conducted the majority of the best leading research in ketogenic metabolism. So this book is great because it's not a dogmatic low carb book. Basically, this book is specifically about inducing fat loss, treating excessive body fat, treating metabolic syndrome basically with carbohydrate moderation. And it focuses not just on fat loss, but on health. So this book, they recommend a minimum carbohydrate intake, something like 15 grams from vegetables. And so in this book, they actually have a mandatory vegetable intake. So obviously I've been pretty skeptical about the necessity of vegetables in the diet, but a lot of the problems with keto and low carb diets that people have come from a lack of minerals. And so, and also just bowel intolerances in the beginning of a high fat diet. So fiber can kind of like prevent the diarrhea people get, and the minerals found in things like cooked cruciferous vegetables and things like that can actually help people with some of the keto flu symptoms. So I don't advocate, mandatory vegetables, but this book does kind of recommend a minimum daily intake of vegetables, which I think is good, especially if we're dealing with the average population. If you're a clinician and you're just trying to help someone become healthy, and this is the first structured diet they've ever been on, having variety and stuff like that's important for sustainability. Like, they're not gonna, for adherence, like they're not gonna adhere to a diet that's just like meat and fruit or something like that. So anyway, yeah, this book, they recommend a minimum intake of vegetables. So that's gonna add variety. It's gonna add a variety of nutrients and magnesium and vitamin C and things that they need. They're probably not getting from their regular junk food diet. It also recommends the adequate protein. So about 1 gram per pound of lean mass typically. They give some good recommendations on protein, but I think their protein intake recommendations are a little bit lower than what I'd like, but still pretty good. They talk about the importance of increasing your salt intake on a low carb diet, which most low carb and keto diet books don't talk about. It has a little section in the back about why saturated fat is not harmful, and it talks about reversing diabetes and things like that. It has a huge emphasis on the clinical application of low carb diets. It talks about metabolic syndrome, diabetes, hunger hormones and things like that, heart disease, lowering blood pressure. And I think it has a little section about medications and working with your doctor and stuff like that. It does have a discussion about healthy fats versus unhealthy fats, but you guys got to understand, you guys and you girls and everything in between, you need to understand that this book was written in like 2010. So at this point, that's about what, like 11 or 12 years ago that this book was written. So most of the fat recommendations are on point, but it does include things like canola oil and its healthy fat recommendations. Obviously, I don't recommend canola oil at all, but other than that, its fat recommendations are pretty on point. It also talks about omega-3s and their benefits. And the most amazing thing about this book, from a clinician standpoint, from a health or a fitness professional standpoint, is that this book makes it easy for anybody to follow a low-carb diet. That's why I really like this book, is because it tells you how to do a keto or a low-carb diet. If you're vegan, it talks about how to eat out on a keto diet. It tells you what to order at an Italian food restaurant, at a Mexican food restaurant. So a lot of the excuses I get from clients who find it hard to adhere to the diet is like, oh, well, you know, I come from a Mexican family, blah, 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 you know, or like, I like to eat out with my family, and, you know, it's hard to eat out when you're on a diet. And it's like, these are stupid excuses. And generally it's just a matter of knowing, like, hey, you don't have to eat the rice with your, you know, barbacoa or whatever. You can skip the tortillas or whatever, you know. You can order a salad with lots of meat, and you can eat the cheese and sour cream and guacamole too, you know, type of thing. So this book makes all those excuses completely irrelevant. And but the biggest thing that I like about this book is that it's not dogmatic. Basically, this book is not about like, oh, I'm never going to eat freaking pizza again. This book basically caters carbohydrate intake to your own level of fat loss and health. So as you get leaner and you get healthier, you can actually start to add carbs back into your diet. And this book outlines the protocol of reducing carbs to induce fat loss and to regulate your metabolism, to, you know, get your blood sugar back on point, your insulin sensitivity back on point. And then as you get healthier, you start to add like 5 carbs at a time, you know, per week, until you reach your carb intake that you can sustain without messing up your blood sugar or increasing fat gain again. So that's probably the hugest benefit outside of explaining how to do this diet in a practical standpoint, you know, at restaurants and whatnot. The fact that the whole diet surrounds you know, getting somebody back to eating carbs later on, you know, while at the beginning you've got to lower those carbs. So this book is all about using low carb diets and carbohydrate restriction as a medicine to where eventually you can live as a normal person again. Now, mind you, you're never going to be able to just binge on cheesecake or binge on pizza or some shit like that, you know, or eat donuts every day. But you will be able to eat a little bit of carbs here and there eventually. But you got to have an overall foundation of health, and this book kind of helps you get there. So I'm a really big fan of this book, and like, you know, out of all the books I love this one a lot, mostly because it's not necessarily a keto book. And it's not like a freaking like, oh, a paleo diet or whatever. It just outlines a protocol to get people to become healthy and eat in a sustainable way that they can adhere to later on. You know? So I do believe it's probably the best freaking nutritional protocol to get people to lose weight and then be on point for the long term. So, and the greatest thing of all is written by the very best people, scientists in the world, who actually wrote most of the low-carb research. So leave your question and comments down below. Let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you all next time.